Hello and welcome back here. In this video what we're going to be doing is converting this deep red door to a bright white. The color of the door is Classic Burgundy by Benjamin Moore. You can see that right up here. And we're going to be converting it to a Benjamin Moore color called Simply White here, okay? And I have this primer tinted towards the Simply White. This is the Benjamin Moore Fresh Start, and this is an interior and an exterior primer that covers and hides gray, especially the deep dark reds. So we're going to be applying 2 coats of the Simply White Fresh Start primer to this red door here. So you can see from the video how there's a bunch of dust and whatnot, but what we're going to do for the prep work is I have a piece of sandpaper right here, and this is the Gator grit. This stuff is great, it'll last a long time, and this is 120 grit here. So we're just going to give the surface a light sand so that it's smooth and the surface is scuffed up, and the sheen of this deep red, the Classic Burgundy, is a satin sheen. So you definitely want to provide some tooth for the primer to stick to. And guys, I'm just doing just a light sand. I'm not sanding the hell out of it. You just want to sand to make the surface smooth and to put some scuff marks in it again, so that the primer has something to cling to or grab to or bond to here. Just gonna get in the corners, be as best as possible here. Okay, so that takes care of that. I'll put my piece of sandpaper down. And I also have a sanding pad here that's going to help me get into the corners, into the contours of the door here, where it starts to form half of the circle here. I'm getting all that dust and stuff off that you saw in the video before I started. Okay, so I'll put that down there. And now when I drag my finger, there's dust on it here. So I'm gonna take my dust brush here and just give it a light brushing to get rid of all that dust that was created, that was both on the door before I started, and the dust that was incurred from the sanding that I just did. Make sure to get into the corners and whatnot, because when you go to prime, you don't want that to become an issue. So the door has been sanded and dusted off, and now an extra level of prep that I always do is I also use a liquid deglosser, and this is made by Klean Strip, and it's called Liquid Sandpaper. So what this is going to do is going to degloss the surface. It's going to degloss the satin sheen that was on the red here, and it's also going to clean the door and get rid of any dust, dirt, grease, grime. Because with front doors and whatnot, people put their hands all over it and stuff like that. So it's very important to always use a deglosser, okay? Because this is going to cut the sheen. It's going to cut the satin sheen and clean the surface at the same time. And I take the brush and I load up the corners here. Okay. So that's what it looks like there. Then we start in the corner here, and you want to apply this to every square inch of the door. okay? And guys, this doesn't take long either. And it just does a great job of cleaning the surface and cutting the sheen before you go to prime. And when you do this, it ensures that you're painting over a totally clean and deglossed surface. And when you do this, it's going to make the primer bond better to this Satin Sheen paint here. So just so you don't forget to do an area, I always do the insides of the panels first, and then we'll do the perimeter of the door last. Okay, so that's going to ensure that we're not going to miss any areas. Okay. Start at the bottom here. And another benefit of using the deglosser is that when you go to prime, the primer isn't going to disperse on the surface or spread out. It's gonna bond right to the surface. If you didn't use the deglosser, there's more of a chance that it could just move around on the surface and not really grab to it tightly. Okay, you can't see, but I'll do this the side of the door here. Okay, so there's a little bit of a red tint to my rag here. Okay. Now when you drag your finger across it, see, it makes that sound because it's deglossed. Whereas before with the Satin Sheen, you could rub your finger across it and you wouldn't hear that, because that is the protection of the gloss. It's a slippery surface, and that's what protects it from the rain, wind, sun, and whatnot. So this stuff, the temperature is probably in the 80s here, so this is going to dry out fast. And it's kind of wet in the corners here, so we're just going to let this set up for like a half hour, and then we'll be back to start applying the primer. So I'll see you guys on the next one. Hello and welcome back here. We've given the door approximately a half hour to dry out from after I deglossed it. So the door has been prepped, it has been sanded, it has been dusted off, and lastly we applied a deglosser to the surface to get rid of all the dust, grime, and to cut the sheen of the previous paint, which is a Satin Sheen. So now it's time to prime here. And again, I'm going to be priming with the Benjamin Moore Fresh Start Primer. This is an interior and an exterior primer, and it covers and hides great. And once again, we're converting this door to Simply White, which is a very tough color to get. This Simply White is basically it's a white with a little bit of a yellow undertone, so it looks softer when the sunlight hits it, and it's not really a stark bright white like a super white. It has just a little bit of a yellow undertone to it, but with the yellow undertone to it, the yellows don't cover great. Okay, so you definitely want to use a high quality primer when attempting a job like this to limit the potential amount of coats you have to apply, or to reduce the amount of future coats to apply here. So I'll put this down here. The brush I'm going to be using is a Corona Excalibur Chinex bristle brush, and this is 1.25 inches, and it's an angular brush. Okay. And This is a great brush because I just like the way that it lays down the paint, and it's flexible and it's easy to clean up. Okay. Now with these front doors, I'm not a big fan of seeing the brush strokes in them. I know that some people prefer that, but I prefer a spray-like finish to them. So the roller that we're going to be using is this roller right here, and it's made by Whizz, and it's a microfiber roller. Okay, and the nap is 1/4 inch thick. And what I did for this is I wet the roller down to get the water into the microfiber, and then I spun it out so that there's just like a little bit of water. And when you do that, it helps when you load up the roller, because there's a teeny bit of water in here, and it speeds up the loading process. And what that also does too is that when you go to clean up, the cleanup is easier because you wet the roller a little bit. Okay. So I have my handy paint pail here, and this is great because you can just roll right from your bucket here. So I have the Simply White primer in here, and we're going to load up here. And when you load up, you really want to put a lot onto this microfiber roller right here. And the great thing about this is that the end of this has the microfiber on it too. So you definitely want to load that up too. Okay, so spend like 20 or 30 seconds working the primer into the roller, so it's really all loaded up here. Okay, so what I like to use the roller to transfer the paint to the door. And what we're going to do is we're just going to start with the insides here, and since the roller has the bristles, or has the microfiber on the outside, you can get into all the contours of the door here, which is great. Okay, so that's loaded up right there, and we'll also come across to this side here. And guys, when you're working with doing a door like this, you have to move fast. Okay, you really want to move fast because we're going to do it all in just one shot. Okay, so it's loaded up there, and now I'll take my paintbrush and just load up a little bit there and work the corners. Okay, really forcing the paint and spreading it out into the corners here where I couldn't get it in there with the roller. Okay, so we're going to even out the paint with the brush here. Okay, do the same for this side here. It doesn't have to be perfect here because, again, we're going to use the roller to take away the brush strokes. Okay? So I'll put this down here. And now with my roller here, I'm just going to go up, down, come across to the sides here. Okay, now I'm redistributing the paint here evenly. Okay, I'm doing it to the sides, to the corners. You really want to try to apply an even coat here. And just go up, down, and take care of that there. Okay, so that's done right now. Now we'll come to the top here, come across like that, come to the middle. And again, I forgot to mention this, but I have the floor covered off with the X-board, so none of the splatter will get onto the hardwood floors here. Okay, just go real easy. Try to leave as much of the paint or the primer there as possible. So you can see how far that I've gotten right there. Now it's time to load up again. I'll hit the end of it. Okay, I'm really putting a lot of primer onto this microfiber roller here. You can see how the end really gets into all the corners and whatnot, but not like 100%. And again, we're going to use the brush for that there. So I'll grab my brush here and just work the paint into the corners or the grooves of the door. Okay, if you have any heavy drips, then that's the job of the brush here to get rid of that stuff there. So I'll come here, go up, up, come to the sides. Come back here. Okay, so I just took care of that whole thing there. Now I'll come down here. Okay, grab my brush here and work the paint into the corners. And I'll roll that up here. Put the paint or release the paint in the middle of the door here, and then spread it out. And come back up here because the brush strokes are right there. Take away those. So you can see how fast that I'm applying the primer. And we're not going to get any of the brush strokes because we're using the microfiber 4-inch, 1/4-inch nap here. Okay, so now so we got basically 3/4 of the door done here in a short amount of time. You can even just take the roller on like an angle here to further get into the grooves, but again, you're going to need the brush to really get in the corners here. And again, when you're using the brush, you can just slop it around. You don't have to be perfect there, okay? But just make sure that you take care of any drips or whatnot with the brush. Okay, so I'm happy with that. We'll come back here to load up the roller again. Start in the middle to release the paint and then slowly work out. Okay, so come into the corners, go up, down, and I'm applying just a little bit of pressure to the roller. You don't want to apply too much because then it's going to squish out the paint. And then it's going to flatten the roller too, which you don't want. You want the roller to maintain its thickness so that it's able to get into the corners and to release the paint or the primer. Okay, so I'll come over here and get rid of that. And on the last paint here, we'll load up. These rollers are great because they give a spray-like finish to the paint, and And also, you're going to get a uniform sheen too. And you're not going to see any of the brush strokes and stuff like that. And when you're painting a door, you want the sheen to be uniform and consistent so that it looks nice. And when the sun hits it, it'll have a uniform sheen or a reflection. See, I'm just lightly going over the surface to leave the primer there. You don't want to apply too much of the pressure. Okay, come back up here to take away those brush strokes. Come down to the bottom. Okay. Reload back up. And the piece of rubber that was at the bottom was already painted right here, so I'm not going to bother trying to cut that in. We're just going to paint right over it, because we don't want that to be red. Okay. So the door is basically done here. I'm going to paint the sides, but we won't do that in film here. I'm just going to go back to look at my work to see if I have any areas where there's too much paint and it looks good. But if there was, since we work so fast, you can always just go back into this right here. So if there was a drip or something like that there, you can just go right back into it. Come up here. Oh, there's a little part where it's starting to pull up here, so I'll get rid of that there. Start going up like that. Come down here, this all looks good. This looks good here, but let's say that you put too much like down here and it's starting to sag. Just come real gently. Just roll it out. Okay, this looks good here. And you really want to look at it from all different angles here, because if you do have a drip, then you have to wait till it dries and you have to sand it down, and it's just a nightmare. So just always go back, okay, and I'll look at your work here. That looks fine there. So that's the first coat of the Benjamin Moore Fresh Start Primer that was tinted towards the desired top coat, which is simply white. Again, that's a very tough color to get, especially on top of the deep red, which was the classic Burgundy here. So we're just going to let this dry out here. You want to let this dry out for a few hours, okay, before you recoat it here. That's very important. You just don't want to do this and like a half hour later try to apply another coat to it here. So again, just always go back and look at your work here. Okay, so the microfiber roller works great to both transfer the paint to the door. Then I use my brush to get into all the corners, and then I use the roller again to go over what I just did with the brush to leave the spray-like appearance that this microfiber roller delivers here. So we'll just let this dry out, and then we'll be back to apply the second coat of the Fresh Start Primer. So we'll see you on the next one.